She thought he abandoned her for ambition. He thought she betrayed him for someone else. But neither knew the truth, that a devastating loss tore her world apart while he turned away, believing a lie. 7 years later, fate brings them back, but pride, pain, and secrets still burn between them. Will love get a second chance, or is it too late? Follow the story of Madeline Hart and Grayson Vance, a love that refused to die. Where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments and don't forget to subscribe for more unforgettable stories like this one. The rooftop bar shimmered under the velvet sky, strings of golden lanterns swaying gently in the breeze above rows of crystal glasses and half-finished conversations. Brooklyn's skyline burned with city light, skyscrapers glowing like gods watching over the sleepless. A jazz quartet played softly in the background, the low hum of a saxophone twining with the clink of ice in tumblers. Near the bar's far corner, where the crowd thinned and the night thickened, Madeline Hart sat alone on a tall stool, her legs crossed elegantly, one heel slipping slightly from her shoe as if tired of the weight she carried. Her emerald dress hugged her frame, catching flashes of amber light with every movement. A glass of Prosecco sat in her hand, nearly empty. Fizz long gone, like the illusion of control she wore on her face. She tilted her head, eyes half-lidded, watching the reflection of herself in the sleek glass behind the bar. Her hair, chestnut and wild in waves, framed her face perfectly, but there was no joy in her expression. Only the lingering fog of memories she hadn't been able to drown in champagne. When she spoke, it was to herself, a whisper. Shouldn't have come. But she had. She always did. The company, Vance & Co., held these client mixers every spring, and somehow she always found herself here, draped in silk and regrets. From the crowd, a voice rang out, smooth, authoritative, too familiar. She didn't need to look to know who it was. Grayson Vance, CEO, her former everything, and the man who hadn't looked her in the eye in over 7 years. He stepped into view like a shadow returned from war. Tall and crisp in a tailored charcoal suit, his dark hair slicked back, but unruly at the edges. There was a chill to him, like glass before it breaks. He said something to a colleague, shook a hand, and ordered a drink. Neat bourbon. Always neat, always rigid. He didn't see her at first, but she saw him. She always did. Madeline took a long sip of her drink and turned away, but not fast enough. His gaze found her, locked in. No smile, no warmth, just the sting of unspoken history between them. He walked over, slow, like a man approaching a bomb he'd once buried. He took the stool beside her without asking. "Didn't expect you here," he said, voice like gravel, polished by charm. She smirked, eyes still on the skyline. "That makes 2 of us." Their silence said more than words ever could. But then came Jesse Calder. Fresh-faced, sharp-suited, the firm's newest golden boy. He slid between them with a casual grin, placing a fresh drink in front of Madeline. "Figured you could use a refill," he said smoothly. "And a distraction." She laughed lightly, but her eyes flicked to Grayson's face, just in time to catch the flicker of something he quickly buried. Jealousy? Regret? Too late, it was gone. Grayson turned back to the bar, expression blank. But the way his hand tightened around his glass made her pulse quicken. Jesse kept talking, cracking jokes, playing the charming card. But Madeline wasn't listening anymore. Her heart beat loud in her ears. She leaned back, sipping her drink, pretending not to feel the weight of Grayson's presence burning beside her. The heat, the anger, the ache of unfinished stories, they were all still there, simmering under her skin. When Jesse turned to speak with another associate, Madeline shifted slightly, her voice low just for Grayson. 7 years and you still drink bourbon neat. Grayson turned, his eyes ice and thunder. Some things don't change. She smiled bitterly, lifting her glass. No, they don't. As she slid off her stool to leave, her clutch slipped. Grayson bent to grab it, and as he did, a photo spilled out, worn, bent at the corners, a snapshot of 2 college kids laughing in the sun. Him and her. Before everything, before lies, before silence. He froze, staring down at the proof of something neither of them had really let go. Madeline snatched it back, eyes wide with something fragile. "Forget you saw that," she whispered, but Grayson didn't move, and in his eyes something cracked. The office on the 45th floor buzzed with the quiet storm of ambition. Phones ringing, papers rustling, the clack of heels and the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. Vance & Co. was a machine of glass, metal, and mind sharpened by sleepless nights. Into this world, Madeline Hart walked like she belonged, wearing a slate-gray blazer and a look that dared anyone to underestimate her. Her hair was tied up, her lipstick precise. She was a storm contained in a coffee cup and case files. But beneath the steel exterior, she felt him, Grayson Vance, her past, her wound, her gravity. He stood at the end of the hallway as she entered the conference room, giving instructions to a senior partner. Grayson looked the same, and nothing like he used to. Taller somehow, colder definitely. His dark suit fit like armor, and his expression gave away nothing. Except his eyes. His eyes found her the moment she stepped in. Just for a second, but long enough to stir everything she'd spent years burying. The Graystar Energy case had brought them back into daily orbit, a high-profile lawsuit involving falsified environmental reports. Community damages and billions in liability. Madeline had been requested by the board. Her reputation was airtight, her courtroom record undefeated. Grayson hadn't objected, but his silence during the announcement had been deafening. At the first strategy meeting, she stood before a wall-sized screen, breaking down timelines and contracts with razor clarity. "They think their shell company will shield them," she said, eyes sharp. "But I found a pattern in the audit logs. This doesn't just crack their defense, it dismantles it." The room nodded, murmurs of approval following. But when she sat, Grayson finally spoke, voice low and flat. "Keep the timeline tight. No distractions." She smiled, leaning back. "Of course, Mr. Vance wouldn't dream of slowing down your empire." The room chuckled, but Grayson didn't flinch. She wasn't sure if that made her feel victorious or tired. Later in the break room, Jesse Calder slid into the seat across from her with 2 coffees. "Guess who remembered your caffeine order?" he said, grinning. "Jesse," she said, eyebrow raised. "Are you trying to bribe me into liking you?" He winked. "Is it working?" She laughed despite herself, but the moment she looked up and saw Grayson watching from across the room, coffee in hand, frozen mid-step, her smile faltered. Back at her desk, a post-it note in neat handwriting waited atop her files. "Check the discrepancy on line 47. No name. But she knew it was him. Only Grayson would have caught that before she did. By week's end, they'd clashed more than once. In meetings, she challenged him openly. He countered with cold logic. She teased. He didn't flinch. But sometimes, just for a second, his eyes lingered too long, and hers softened when she thought no one was looking. On Friday, after a particularly brutal day of depositions, she stayed late to reorganize her arguments. The office had gone quiet. Only the sound of the janitor's cart echoed in the distance. As she leaned over her desk, rereading affidavits, the door creaked open. Grayson stepped inside. He didn't speak, just walked to her desk and set down a folder. "More inconsistencies in Graystar's vendor accounts," he said. "Use them. It'll corner them into settling." Madeline didn't reach for it. "Why are you really here, Grayson?" His jaw worked. He looked down, then up. "Because I see what you're doing. You're carrying too much." She stared at him. "That's not your concern." He exhaled, almost laughing at himself. "It is." Their eyes locked, and for a moment the years fell away. But just as quickly, she broke the gaze. "Thank you for the folder," she said, voice tight. "You can go now." Grayson hesitated, then turned and walked out, the door closing behind him, like the last word neither of them could say. But as she looked at the folder again, fingers trembling, she whispered into the empty room, "Why do you still care?" The rain came down gently over the NYU campus, misting the red brick buildings and dampening the stone steps where clusters of students huddled with coffee cups and textbooks. It was the kind of day that made memories cling harder to the skin, and Madeline Hart, then just 20, stood under the awning outside Bop's library with a copy of her contracts textbook pressed to her chest and a sarcastic smile curling her lips. Grayson Vance. A 23-year-old grad student with a mind like a scalpel and a mouth that rarely wasted words had just declared in class that emotional reasoning had no place in commercial litigation. Madeline, ever the firebrand, had raised her hand and shot back with something about ethics being the spite of law, not its shadow. The entire class had laughed, even the professor. Grayson had only looked at her with that half-smirk he wore when he was intrigued. Their first kiss happened 3 weeks later, outside a deli after midnight. They shared a grilled cheese sandwich and a single umbrella, arguing over tort reform while his hand brushed against hers. When he finally leaned in, it was sudden, impatient, and completely perfect. They became inseparable after that. Study sessions bled into rooftop stargazing. Late-night walks through Greenwich Village turned into sleepovers at each other's cramped apartments. She introduced him to her parents during spring break. They adored him. He gave her a silver necklace with a tiny phoenix charm and whispered, "You're fire. You'll never burn out." But love, even when real, isn't always enough. Grayson's father, Richard Vance, was the kind of man who wore legacy like armor. CEO of Vance & Co., he viewed emotion as weakness and ambition as the only acceptable currency. He tolerated Madeline for exactly 3 meetings. Too headstrong. He told Grayson during a call, "You need someone who elevates your future, not distracts from it." Grayson tried to tune him out, but the pressure mounted. He began working part-time at the firm to prepare for a full-time role after graduation. His once free evenings with Madeline became rare. She noticed the change. How his voice grew clipped, how his eyes sometimes wandered when she spoke. Still, she believed in them, believed that love could outrun duty. Then came the night that shattered everything. Madeline was waiting for him at their usual cafe, a cozy little place lit by amber bulbs and the scent of fresh cinnamon. Her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Attached was a photo, Grayson seated at a sleek uptown restaurant, leaning in close to a stunning brunette, smiling in a way Madeline hadn't seen in weeks. The message read, "This is the man you trust? He's already moved on." She stared at it, cold blooming in her chest. Rain began to fall outside. She dialed him. No answer. She texted. Silence. Hours later, she stood outside his apartment, soaked to the bone, the picture trembling in her hand. When he opened the door, tired and distracted, she threw the phone at him. "Is this who you are now?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Was I just a phase?" Grayson picked up the phone, eyes scanning the photo, his jaw clenched. "That's not what you think," he said. "It was a business dinner. My father arranged it." "You didn't even answer my call," she whispered, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "You made me feel crazy, like I imagined everything." "I didn't know." "No, Grayson," she cut him off. "You chose not to know." She turned and walked into the storm. He didn't follow. Pride held him frozen. 3 days later, Madeline lost her parents in a car crash on Route 18. The impact was fatal. No seatbelts, no warning, just a police call that shattered what little of her heart remained. She withdrew from school, from everyone, and disappeared. Grayson tried to find her weeks later when the silence became unbearable. A friend texted him, "She's moved on. Let it go." A blurry photo followed, Madeline in a bar, a stranger's arm around her. He didn't know the image was staged. He believed she'd replaced him, that she never really loved him, and so he let her go. But he never forgot her. The Gala shimmered like a dream built on glass, fragile, beautiful, and threatening to crack at the slightest touch. Crystal chandeliers rained golden light over a sea of tailored suits and elegant gowns in the grand ballroom of the Anderton Hotel, the air thick with perfume, champagne, and the quiet hum of professional flattery. Somewhere near the open bar, Madeline Hart stood in a black velvet gown that hugged her like it knew her secrets. Her hair cascaded in polished waves down her back, her makeup impeccable, her smile radiant but hollow. The phoenix necklace glinted against her skin, a private reminder of who she used to be before the world caved in. Jesse Calder hovered close, all charming smirks and easy banter. He looked good, gray suit, loosened tie, just enough stubble to be intentionally careless. He leaned in, whispering something about Rome, about carbonara and sunshine, and Madeline laughed, loud and bright enough to earn glances from nearby colleagues, but her eyes weren't on Jesse. They were drifting, again, to Grayson Vance, standing across the room, locked in conversation with the firm's board chair. His posture was military precise, his jaw tense, and though he nodded when appropriate, his eyes kept finding her. They always did. When the orchestra shifted into a slower rhythm, Jesse placed his wineglass down and extended his hand. "Dance with me, most brilliant woman in the room." Madeline hesitated, then placed her hand in his. "Why not?" she murmured, letting him lead her onto the polished floor. They twirled beneath the chandeliers, her gown fanning around her legs like a midnight storm. She kept her smile wide, her laughter ready, but her mind wandered. Jesse, ever perceptive, leaned down. "You okay? You're miles away." She blinked, nodding too quickly. "Just tired," she said. "Long week." Then he did something unexpected. He kissed her. Lightly, carefully, but unmistakably. A hush rippled across the dance floor. Across the room, Grayson's world detonated. His wineglass tilted, red liquid sloshing dangerously close to the rim. His heart thundered, and then, before he even thought it through, he was moving, storming across the floor, shouldering through the stunned crowd, grabbing Madeline's wrist mid-spin. "Come with me," he growled, voice tight. "What the hell are you doing?" Jesse barked, stepping forward. "Back off, Calder," Grayson snapped, his grip unyielding. "This isn't your conversation." "Grayson, let go," Madeline hissed, tugging her arm. But he didn't. He dragged her through the side doors into a narrow hallway, the music and chatter muffled behind thick walls. The door clicked shut, and Madeline yanked free, spinning to face him, eyes blazing. "Are you insane?" she spat. "Dragging me out like this? What gives you the right?" He didn't answer right away. His chest heaved. "What game are you playing with him?" Madeline laughed bitterly, folding her arms. "Game? You think this is a game?" "He asked me to dance. He kissed me. End of story." Grayson stepped forward, voice low and shaking. "You let him. In front of everyone, like I don't exist." "You don't," she snapped, her voice like ice. "Not anymore." He stared at her, wounded. "Don't lie." "You want to talk about lies?" She shoved a finger into his chest. "You said the past was the past. You walked away. You never looked back." "I was wrong," he whispered. "I didn't know." "No, you didn't want to know," she cried. "You believed I betrayed you without ever asking, and now you want to act like you care?" "I do care," he said, almost broken. "I've always cared." Madeline took a shaky breath, tears gathering but refusing to fall. "Then you're 7 years too late." She turned to leave. Grayson stood still, fists clenched, voice barely audible. "I never stopped loving you." But she didn't stop. She walked away, and the silence that followed screamed louder than anything he'd ever heard. Rain smeared the windows of the 45th floor office, turning the Manhattan skyline into a ghostly blur of light and shadow. Grayson Vance sat alone in the dim archive room, sleeves rolled up, surrounded by yellowing folders and dust-laced silence. The storm outside mirrored the one inside him. Since the gala, since the moment Madeline's voice cracked and she turned away from him with eyes full of fire and pain, he hadn't been able to sleep. He told himself it was pride. Old wounds, but it was more. It was her. He didn't know why he'd come to the archive room that night, only that something told him to look deeper. Not into the Gray Star case, but into her. And then he found it, a thin folder, tucked in the wrong box. Heart versus Transway Logistics. He froze, fingers trembling as he pulled it free. The first page made his breath catch. A police report from 2016, documenting a highway crash that killed Laura and Michael Hart, Madeline's parents. His heart slammed against his ribs. He turned the pages quickly now. Ambulance reports, court documents, a faded newspaper clipping showing Madeline standing outside a courthouse. Her eyes were hollow, her expression empty. She looked like someone who had lost everything. And she had. The date of the accident was only days after their last argument. While he had been drowning in his own bitterness, she had been burying her family. While he deleted her number and told himself she was cold, she had stood in the rain beside 2 caskets with no one beside her. Grayson leaned back in the chair, the file on his lap. For the first time in years, his eyes burned. "God, Maddie," he whispered into the quiet. "I didn't know." He had to help her. He couldn't change the past, but he could be part of her future. From that day forward, he became her silent shadow. He began staying late at the office, poring over Graystar's financials, searching for loopholes, buried evidence. When he found a discrepancy, a series of offshore transfers that could tie Graystar to cover-ups, he printed it, sealed it in an unmarked envelope, and left it on her desk. He never signed his name. He didn't need to. He ordered lunch from her favorite Italian cafe and had it delivered anonymously with a simple note. "Eat something. You're human too." He placed a bottle of headache medicine on her desk one morning, after watching her rub her temples through a 5-hour strategy meeting. She never asked who sent them, but every time her fingers brushed the phoenix pendant on her necklace, her eyes softened. She knew. The day of the verdict. Madeline stood in courtroom 7 like a warrior queen in navy blue. Her voice rang clear and strong as she delivered her closing argument. "This case isn't about numbers," she told the jury. "It's about the lives those numbers hide. We are the voice for those who can no longer speak." And when the verdict was read, Graystar found guilty, ordered to pay millions in damages. The courtroom erupted. Her team cheered. Cameras flashed. But she didn't smile. She staggered slightly, caught herself on the podium, then collapsed. Grayson was the first to reach her. He rushed from the gallery, shoving through stunned attorneys, dropping to his knees beside her as her papers scattered across the floor. "May," he called, lifting her gently, pressing his hand to her cheek. "Come on, open your eyes." Her lashes fluttered. "I'm fine," she murmured weakly. "No, you're not," he said, already lifting her into his arms. "You've carried everything alone long enough." At the clinic, he stayed beside her bed, watching every rise and fall of her chest, as if her breathing kept his own lungs moving. When she woke, she turned to him slowly. "Why now?" she whispered. "After everything?" Grayson took her hand. "Because I finally saw you. Not the version I imagined, but the woman who survived it all." Tears slipped from her eyes. She didn't speak. She just leaned into his touch, soft, hesitant, but real. And that was the beginning of everything they had yet to say. Sometimes love isn't about perfect timing. It's about surviving the storm long enough to find your way back. Madeline and Grayson's story reminds us that misunderstandings, pride, and silence can destroy even the most powerful love. But it also teaches us something deeper, that healing is possible when truth is revealed and vulnerability is allowed to take center stage. Grayson believed a lie for 7 years, and Madeline suffered alone with unimaginable pain. Yet despite the years lost and wounds left behind, they found their way back to each other, not because they forgot the past, but because they finally faced it together. Their journey shows us that love is not just a feeling, it's a choice. A choice to listen, to forgive, to fight when it's easier to walk away. It's easy to carry bitterness and hide behind pride. It's far harder to let your heart speak again when it's been broken. But the reward? A love deeper than before. So if you're holding on to silence, if there's someone you miss, maybe this is your sign. Speak your truth before too much time slips away. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. We'd love to know. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more heart-tugging love stories like this. There's always another story waiting to be told.